I thought my mother loved me equally until I discovered she gave my entire $23,000 college fund to my golden child brother. What she did not know was that I had been meticulously keeping every single receipt, bank statement, and document since I was 16 years old. Now, 3 years later, I am about to show her exactly what happens when you steal from someone who never forgets and always keeps receipts. You know what hits different about family betrayal? It is not just the money. It is realizing that the person who was supposed to protect you was actually the one planning your downfall all along. Before we dive into this absolutely wild family revenge story, drop a comment and let me know where you are watching from. If this kind of justice-served content is your thing, smash that like button because trust me, this story has more twists than a pretzel factory. And definitely subscribe because family drama stories like this one do not come around every day, and you will want to be here for the next bombshell revelation. My name is Serafina Mitchell, and I have always been the responsible one in my family, while my younger brother Austin spent his teenage years partying and getting into trouble. I worked 3 jobs to save money for college. I babysat the neighborhood kids every weekend, worked at the local diner after school, and spent my summers lifeguarding at the community pool. Every single paycheck went straight into my college savings account that my mother helped me set up when I was 16. The account was supposed to be untouchable until I turned 18 and started applying to universities. My mother, Patricia Mitchell, was the co-signer, which I thought was just a normal parental oversight thing. I trusted her completely. She was my mom after all, and she had always emphasized the importance of education and working hard for your dreams. For 2 years, I watched that account grow. Every deposit slip was carefully filed in a purple binder that I kept in my desk drawer. Every bank statement was reviewed and organized by date. I was obsessed with tracking my progress because college was everything to me. I had dreams of becoming a forensic accountant inspired by true crime documentaries and my natural talent for finding discrepancies in numbers. By the time I graduated high school, I had saved $23,467. I was so proud of that number. It represented countless hours of hard work, missed social events, and sacrifices that most teenagers would never make. I had even calculated exactly how much it would cover 2 full years of community college plus books and supplies with a small buffer for emergencies. The first red flag should have been when my mother suggested I wait a year before starting college. She said it would be good for me to take a gap year, maybe travel a little, experience life outside of academics. But I knew we could not afford travel, and I had never expressed any interest in delaying my education. I was confused but trusted her judgment. She was always the practical one in our family. During my gap year, I got a full-time job at a local accounting firm as a filing clerk. The work was boring, but it gave me insight into the world I wanted to join eventually. I kept adding to my college fund, bringing the total up to almost $26,000 by the following spring. I was ready to apply for the fall semester and finally start my real life. That is when I decided to check my college fund balance before meeting with the financial aid counselor at the community college. I logged into the online banking system, expecting to see my carefully saved money waiting for me. Instead, I saw a balance of $312. I stared at the screen for what felt like hours, refreshing the page over and over, convinced there had to be some kind of technical error. There was no way that 2 years and 10 months of savings could just disappear. I called the bank immediately, my hands shaking as I dialed. The customer service representative was sympathetic but firm. The account showed a series of large withdrawals over the past 8 months, all authorized by the co-signer, my mother. When I asked for details, they told me that privacy policies prevented them from sharing specific information, but they could confirm that all transactions were legitimate and properly authorized. I drove home in a daze, my mind racing through possible explanations. Maybe there was a family emergency I did not know about. Maybe my mother had borrowed the money temporarily and just forgot to tell me. Maybe she was planning to surprise me by paying for college directly instead of making me use my savings. But deep down, I knew none of those explanations felt right. My mother had been acting strange for months, avoiding conversations about my college plans and changing the subject whenever I brought up finances. She had also been spending more money lately, buying new furniture for the living room and taking weekend trips with her sister. When I confronted her that evening, she did not even try to deny it. She just sat at the kitchen table with this defeated look on her face and told me the truth that would change everything between us forever. Austin had gotten into serious trouble. He had been caught selling drugs at his high school and was facing criminal charges. The family needed money for a lawyer, and then for his bail, and then for more legal fees when the case got complicated. She said she had every intention of paying me back. But then Austin decided he wanted to go to college too. And wouldn't it be nice if the money could help both of her children get an education? The way she said it, like it was some kind of generous family sharing plan, made my blood boil. She had taken my money, given it to my brother, who had never worked a day in his life, and then acted like I should be grateful for the opportunity to sacrifice my dreams for his fresh start. But here is the thing about growing up wanting to be a forensic accountant: you learn to pay attention to details. You learn to keep records. And you learn that paper trails always tell the truth, even when people lie. I did not explode at my mother that night, even though every fiber of my being wanted to scream. Instead, I went to my room, pulled out that purple binder, and started building my case. Because if there is one thing I learned from all those true crime shows, it is that evidence is everything, and emotions without proof are just drama. My documentation was more thorough than I had even realized. I had copies of every deposit slip, every bank statement, and even photographs of myself at work with timestamps. I had kept a detailed journal of my work hours and earnings cross-referenced with my pay stubs. I had saved every text message where my mother praised my work ethic and encouraged my college savings. I had even kept the birthday cards where she wrote things like, "So proud of your dedication to your future," and "Cannot wait to see you graduate." But I needed more than just proof of my savings. I needed proof of where the money actually went. So I did what any aspiring forensic accountant would do. I started investigating. I began with social media. Austin had always been careless about his online presence, posting pictures of everything he did. I went back through 8 months of his Instagram and Facebook posts, screenshotting everything with timestamps. There were photos of him at expensive restaurants, wearing new designer clothes, and taking trips to Las Vegas and Miami. There were pictures of him with a brand new motorcycle that I knew cost at least $8,000. There were photos from music festivals that required expensive tickets and hotel stays. Then I looked at my mother's social media. She had been more discreet, but there were still clues. Photos of her and Austin shopping together. Pictures of the new living room furniture she claimed to have gotten on sale. A post about taking Austin apartment hunting near the State University with the caption, "So excited for my baby boy's fresh start." I cross-referenced every photo with my bank statements, and the timeline was damning. Every major withdrawal from my account corresponded with a new expensive purchase or experience for Austin. The money I had earned serving tables and changing diapers was funding his lifestyle upgrade while I lived at home and continued working to rebuild my savings. But social media was just the beginning. I needed financial proof, and I knew my mother was not careful with paperwork. While she was at work, I went through her desk, her purse, and even her car. I found receipts for Austin's motorcycle credit card statements showing payments for his Las Vegas trip and a lease agreement for his apartment near the university. The deposit alone was $2,000 of my money. The most infuriating discovery was a handwritten note in my mother's purse, apparently from Austin, that said, "Thanks for the early inheritance, Mom. You are the best. Cannot wait to make you proud at college." Early inheritance, like my college fund, was his birthright instead of my earned savings. I photographed everything, uploaded it to cloud storage, and made multiple backup copies. I was building an unshakable case, but I was also uncovering something deeper and more painful than simple theft. This was not a desperate mother making a hard choice in an emergency. This was a deliberate, ongoing transfer of my future to my brother's comfort. The breakthrough came when I found my mother's email password written on a sticky note inside her checkbook. I know it was wrong to access her email, but at that point, I was past caring about invasion of privacy. She had invaded my entire future. What I found in her emails made everything so much worse. There were months of correspondence with Austin about his college fund and how proud she was that she could help him start fresh after his legal troubles. There were emails with extended family members about how Austin was finally getting his life together and how they were so glad Patricia could afford to support his education. But the email that broke my heart completely was one to my Aunt Linda. In it, my mother wrote, "Serafina has always been so self-sufficient and responsible. She will figure out a way to pay for college on her own, she always does. But Austin needs this support to stay on the right path. I know it is not fair, but I have to prioritize the child who needs me most right now." She had convinced herself that stealing my money was actually good parenting, that because I was responsible and hardworking, I deserved to struggle, while Austin deserved to be rewarded for his irresponsibility with my sacrifice. I spent 3 days organizing everything into a comprehensive portfolio. Bank records, receipts, social media evidence, emails, and a detailed timeline of every transaction. I had proof of theft, proof of where the money went, and proof that it was intentional and ongoing rather than a one-time emergency decision. But I also did something else during those 3 days. I researched my legal options. I called the bank and asked about unauthorized account access by cosigners. I looked up local lawyers who specialized in financial crimes. I researched whether what my mother did constituted theft, embezzlement, or fraud under state law. What I learned was complicated but promising. While my mother was technically authorized to access the account as a cosigner using money designated for my education to fund Austin's lifestyle, could potentially be considered a breach of fiduciary duty. More importantly, if I could prove that the account was established specifically for my college expenses, and that she knew this when she took the money, I might have grounds for both criminal charges and civil recovery. Armed with this knowledge, I made a decision that would change everything. I was not going to confront my mother privately and hope she would do the right thing. I was not going to let family loyalty protect her from the consequences of her actions. I was going to expose everything and let the chips fall where they may. The first step was copying all of my evidence and mailing it to my Aunt Linda, my Uncle Robert, and both sets of grandparents. I included a detailed letter explaining what had happened with copies of the most damning evidence attached. I wanted the whole family to know the truth before my mother could control the narrative. Then I scheduled an appointment with a lawyer for the following week. I was going to explore every legal option available to me, from demanding immediate repayment to pressing criminal charges if necessary. But before I did any of that, I had one more confrontation to have. This time, I would not be the heartbroken daughter begging for explanations. This time, I would be the forensic accountant presenting evidence of a crime. The family meeting I called for Sunday afternoon was unlike anything the Mitchells had ever experienced. I had invited everyone, my parents, Austin, both sets of grandparents, my Aunt Linda and Uncle Robert, and even my cousin Jessica, who was studying law at the state university. I told everyone it was important family business that needed to be discussed openly. My mother looked nervous from the moment people started arriving. She kept asking me what this was about, but I just smiled and said we would discuss everything when everyone was here. Austin showed up 20 minutes late as usual, wearing a brand new designer hoodie that probably cost more than I made in a week at the accounting firm. When everyone was seated in our living room, I stood up with my purple binder and a stack of printed evidence. The room went completely silent. Even Austin put down his phone, sensing that something serious was about to happen. I started with a simple statement. 3 months ago, I discovered that my college fund had been emptied without my knowledge or consent. Today, I want to share with all of you exactly what happened to that money and why I have decided to take legal action. The word legal made my mother go pale. Austin looked confused, like he could not understand why anyone would make a big deal about money. But my grandparents leaned forward suddenly, very interested in what I had to say. I presented my case like I was in a courtroom. I started with documentation of my savings efforts, showing pay stubs and deposit slips going back 3 years. I explained how I had worked multiple jobs while maintaining honor roll grades, how I had sacrificed social activities and teenage experiences to build my future. I showed them pictures of me at work, time-stamped bank statements, and the detailed records I had kept of every dollar earned and saved. Then I revealed the theft. I passed around copies of the bank statements showing the withdrawals cross-referenced with dates and amounts. I showed them Austin's social media posts featuring expensive purchases made on the exact same dates money was withdrawn from my account. The evidence was overwhelming and undeniable, but the real bombshell was when I read my mother's email to Aunt Linda out loud. Serafina has always been so self-sufficient and responsible. She will figure out a way to pay for college on her own, she always does. But Austin needs this support to stay on the right path. The silence that followed was deafening. My grandmother was the first to speak, and her voice was shaking with anger. "Patricia, please tell me this is not true. Please tell me you did not steal money from one child to give to another." My mother started crying and launched into a defensive explanation about Austin's legal troubles and how she was just trying to help both of her children. She talked about the lawyer fees and how Austin needed a fresh start, and how she always intended to pay me back. But my Uncle Robert, who worked in banking, cut through her excuses immediately. "Patricia, this is not borrowing. This is theft. You took money that was designated for Serafina's education and used it to fund Austin's lifestyle. That motorcycle alone cost $8,000. How do you justify that as legal expenses?" Austin finally spoke up, and his response was everything I had expected, and worse. "Why is everyone making such a big deal about this? It is just money. Sarah can get student loans like everyone else. I actually needed help, and Mom was just being a good parent." My cousin Jessica, the law student, looked at Austin like he had just confessed to murder on live television. "Are you seriously arguing that you were entitled to steal your sister's college fund? Do you understand that this could be prosecuted as a felony?" That was when Austin got angry. He stood up and started yelling about how I was trying to destroy the family over money, how I was being selfish and vindictive, how I should be grateful that Mom was helping him stay out of jail. He actually said, "Sarah always gets good grades anyway, she will probably get scholarships. I needed that money more than she did." The room erupted. Both of my grandfathers started shouting at Austin about responsibility and consequences. My Aunt Linda was crying and apologizing to me for not knowing what was happening. My Uncle Robert was demanding that my mother explain exactly where every penny of my money had gone. In the middle of all the chaos, I remained calm. I let them argue and shout and express their outrage while I sat quietly with my evidence. Because this was exactly what I had hoped would happen. I needed the family to see Austin and my mother for who they really were, without the protective buffer of private conversations and damage control. When the shouting finally died down, my grandmother asked the question I had been waiting for. "Serafina, what do you want from us? What do you need to make this right?" I had prepared for this moment. I want my money back with interest within 30 days. I want a written acknowledgement from both Mom and Austin that they took my college fund without permission and used it for unauthorized purposes. And I want Austin to sell his motorcycle and return that money immediately, since it was the single largest purchase made with my savings. Austin laughed. Actually laughed. "You want me to sell my bike? That is insane. I am not selling anything. And I am not apologizing for accepting help from my own mother. That was when my cousin Jessica pulled out her own folder. Actually, Austin, you might want to reconsider, because I did some research this week after Sarah called me, and what happened here meets the legal definition of theft by conversion under state law. The fact that Mom was the co-signer does not protect her if she used the money for purposes other than what the account was designated for. And since you knowingly received stolen funds, you could be charged as an accessory. The legal implications hit the room like a bomb. My mother stopped crying and started panicking. Serafina, you would not actually press charges against your own family, would you? I am your mother. I made a mistake, but I was trying to help both of my children. I looked around the room at all of these people who were supposed to love and support me, and I realized that I had been naive for years. My mother had not made a mistake. She had made a choice. She had chosen Austin over me repeatedly and deliberately, and she had convinced herself that it was justified because I was strong enough to handle the consequences. Mom, I said quietly, you did not make a mistake. You made a decision. You decided that Austin's comfort was more important than my future. You decided that his irresponsibility should be rewarded while my hard work should be sacrificed. You decided that I did not matter enough to deserve honesty or respect. Those were not mistakes. Those were choices. My grandfather cleared his throat and addressed my mother directly. Patricia, I think you need to understand something. What you did was not just wrong, it was illegal. And more than that, it was a betrayal of everything we taught you about family and responsibility. If you do not make this right immediately, you are going to lose your daughter forever. And frankly, you will deserve it. That was when the alliances really started forming. My grandparents, aunt, uncle, and cousin all committed to supporting me in whatever action I decided to take. They offered to help me pay for college, to provide character references if I pursued legal action, and to cut off financial and emotional support from my mother and Austin until they made full restitution. But they also gave me something even more valuable: validation. For months, I had been gaslighting myself, wondering if I was overreacting or being too harsh. Hearing my own family members express outrage and disgust at what had been done to me confirmed that my anger was justified and my demands were reasonable. The meeting ended with an ultimatum. My mother and Austin had 7 days to provide a written plan for full restitution, including a timeline for repayment and the immediate sale of items purchased with my money. If they did not comply, I would be filing both criminal charges and a civil lawsuit for recovery of damages. As everyone left that afternoon, I felt something I had not experienced in months: hope. I was not alone in this fight anymore. I had allies who understood the magnitude of what had been done to me and who were willing to help me seek justice. But I also knew that this was just the beginning. Austin and my mother were not going to go down without a fight, and I needed to be prepared for whatever desperate measures they might take to protect themselves. The week following our family meeting felt like the calm before a hurricane. I had given my mother and Austin 7 days to present a restitution plan, and I was cautiously optimistic that the family pressure would force them to do the right thing. My grandparents had been calling my mother daily, and my Uncle Robert had even offered to help her set up a payment plan that would make repayment manageable. But then, my cousin Jessica called me with news that would shatter my newly rebuilt confidence. Sarah, we need to talk. Can you meet me at that coffee shop near campus? There is something you need to know about your case. Her voice sounded strange, distant in a way that made my stomach clench with anxiety. Jessica had been my strongest ally throughout this entire ordeal, helping me understand the legal implications and even offering to represent me if I decided to pursue formal charges. She was the one family member I trusted completely, partly because she was only 2 years older than me and had always treated me like an equal rather than a little cousin to be protected or dismissed. When I arrived at the coffee shop, Jessica was already there fidgeting with her laptop and looking more nervous than I had ever seen her. She had always been the confident one in our family, the straight A student who never doubted herself or her decisions. Seeing her uncomfortable made me immediately defensive. "What is going on?" I asked as I sat down across from her. "Did you find something new in the legal research? Is my case not as strong as we thought?" Jessica took a deep breath and opened her laptop, but she would not meet my eyes. "Sarah, I have been thinking about this situation a lot over the past week, and I have been talking to some of my professors about the legal and ethical implications of family financial disputes." The way she said ethical implications sent a chill down my spine. This was not the language of an ally preparing to go to battle. This was the language of someone preparing to deliver bad news. "The thing is," Jessica continued, "pursuing criminal charges against your mother could have really serious consequences for the whole family. If she gets convicted of theft, she could lose her job, her professional license, maybe even face jail time, and Austin could end up with a criminal record that follows him for the rest of his life." I stared at her in disbelief. "Jessica, they stole $23,000 from me. That is not some minor family squabble. That is a felony. And you are worried about consequences for them." "I am worried about consequences for everyone," she said, finally looking at me directly. "Including you. Do you really want to be the person who sent her own mother to prison? Do you want to be known in this family as the one who destroyed everyone's lives over money?" The word money hung in the air between us like an accusation, as if my college fund was just money rather than years of sacrifice and dreams for my future, as if wanting justice for theft was somehow petty or vindictive. "What are you saying, Jessica? Are you telling me to just forget about what they did?" "I am saying that maybe there is a better way to handle this. Uncle Robert and I have been talking, and we think we can work out a private family solution that gets you your money back without destroying everyone's lives in the process." She pulled a document from her laptop bag and slid it across the table. "We have drafted a family mediation agreement. Your mother would acknowledge that she made a serious mistake in judgment, and she would commit to paying you back over the next 2 years. Austin would sell his motorcycle and some other items to provide immediate partial restitution. In exchange, you would agree not to pursue criminal charges or involve law enforcement." I read through the document, feeling my heart sink with every paragraph. The acknowledgement of mistake was weak and vague, with no admission of actual theft. The repayment plan stretched over 2 years, with no interest or penalties for late payments. Most importantly, Austin would only have to sell some items, not everything he had purchased with my money. "This is garbage, Jessica. This lets them off easy, while I get a fraction of what I'm owed, and I have to wait 2 years to get it. They stole from me, and you want me to accept a payment plan that treats it like a loan. Sarah, you have to think about the bigger picture here. Yes, what they did was wrong, but tearing the family apart is not going to help anyone. Your grandparents are already stressed about this situation. Do you really want to put them through the trauma of criminal proceedings and family members testifying against each other?" That was when I realized what was really happening. Jessica had not been convinced by legal arguments or ethical considerations. She had been pressured by the family to talk me out of pursuing justice. The same family members who had expressed outrage and support just 1 week earlier were now worried about the real-world consequences of holding Austin and my mother accountable. "Who got to you?" I asked quietly. "Was it Grandma, Uncle Robert, or did my mother promise you something to change sides?" Jessica flushed red and started stammering denials, but her reaction told me everything I needed to know. The family meeting that I thought had been a victory for truth and justice had actually been a wake-up call for everyone about how serious this situation could become. They were fine with expressing outrage and demanding accountability, but when it came time for actual consequences, they wanted to protect the family reputation more than they wanted to protect me. "You know what the worst part is?" I said, standing up from the table. "You made me think I had allies. You made me think that someone in this family actually cared about what was right instead of what was convenient, but you are just like the rest of them. You care more about protecting Austin and my mother than you care about justice for what they did to me. That is not fair, Sarah. I am trying to help you find a solution that works for everyone. No, you are trying to help everyone else avoid consequences while I get screwed over again. The same way my mother screwed me over when she decided Austin needed my money more than I did." I grabbed my purse and headed for the door, but Jessica called after me. "Sarah, if you pursue this alone, you are going to lose. You need family support to make this work, and if you alienate everyone who is trying to help you, you will end up with nothing." I turned back to look at her one more time. "Jessica, I already have nothing. They took everything from me, and now you want me to pretend that is okay to keep the peace. But here is what you do not understand. I would rather have nothing and know that I stood up for myself than accept crumbs from people who think I should be grateful for being robbed." Walking out of that coffee shop, I felt more alone than I had since this whole nightmare began. The family support that had given me hope was revealed to be conditional and fragile. They were willing to stand with me as long as it did not cost them anything. But the moment real consequences appeared on the horizon, they abandoned me for the comfortable path of family harmony. But as I drove home, something else started growing alongside my disappointment and anger determination. If my family would not support me in seeking justice, then I would find people who would. I was not going to let them pressure me into accepting a settlement that rewarded theft and betrayed everything I had worked for. The war was far from over. In fact, it was just beginning. The betrayal by Jessica left me feeling isolated and defeated for exactly 48 hours. Then something happened that changed everything. I received a phone call from someone I had never expected to hear from. "Is this Serafina Mitchell? My name is Detective Sarah Rodriguez with the Financial Crimes Unit. I understand you may have information about embezzlement and theft involving family members." My heart started racing. I had not contacted law enforcement yet, still hoping that family pressure would force a resolution. "I am sorry, Detective, but I think there might be some confusion. I have not filed any police reports." "No, but someone else has. We received an anonymous tip about suspicious financial activity involving your college savings account. The caller provided specific dates, amounts, and account numbers. They also mentioned that you have documentation that could support a criminal investigation." I sat down heavily on my bed, my mind spinning. Someone had contacted the police on my behalf. Someone who knew enough details about my situation to provide specific information to law enforcement, but who and why? "Ms. Mitchell, I would like to meet with you to review any evidence you might have. Based on the information we received, this could be a significant financial crimes case. Would you be available to come to the station tomorrow afternoon?" After I hung up, I immediately started calling family members to find out who had contacted the police, but everyone I spoke with denied making the call, and most of them seemed genuinely shocked that law enforcement was now involved. My grandparents were upset that the situation had escalated beyond family mediation. My Uncle Robert was worried about the legal implications for my mother's professional license. The mystery was solved when I met with Detective Rodriguez the next day. She was a sharp-eyed woman in her 40s who specialized in financial crimes involving family members and trusted relationships. As I laid out my evidence for her, she nodded with the recognition of someone who had seen this type of case before. "Ms. Mitchell, the documentation you have here is extremely thorough. Bank records, social media evidence, email correspondence, receipts for purchases made with your money. This is better organized than most cases that come through my department. Whoever taught you to keep records like this did you a huge favor. Detective Rodriguez, can you tell me who contacted your department? I'm trying to understand how this situation came to police attention. She smiled and pulled out a file folder. Actually, I can do better than that. The person who called us wanted to remain anonymous initially, but they have since agreed to meet with you. They are here today, actually waiting in conference room B. My curiosity was overwhelming as Detective Rodriguez led me down the hallway to a small conference room. She opened the door to reveal a woman I had never seen before, perhaps in her 50s, wearing a business suit and carrying a leather briefcase. Serafina, I would like you to meet Margaret Austin. She is a forensic accountant with 20 years of experience in financial crimes investigation. She also has a personal interest in your case. The woman stood up and extended her hand with a warm smile. Hello, Serafina. I know this is confusing, but I hope you will give me a few minutes to explain why I contacted Detective Rodriguez on your behalf. Margaret Austin opened her briefcase and pulled out a folder that looked remarkably similar to my purple binder of evidence. 3 weeks ago, I was having lunch with my neighbor, Linda Patterson. She was upset about a family situation involving her niece, who had been the victim of financial theft by her own mother. The details she shared reminded me of a case I had worked on several years ago, and I asked if she would be willing to have her niece contact me for advice. My mouth fell open. Linda Patterson was my Aunt Linda. This woman was her neighbor, and Aunt Linda had shared my story looking for guidance. When Linda told me that her niece was planning to pursue legal action alone without proper forensic support, I knew I had to help. Financial crimes within families are notoriously difficult to prosecute because of the emotional manipulation and pressure to drop charges. Victims often end up accepting inadequate settlements because they do not have the professional support they need to see the case through. Margaret spread out documents from her briefcase, and I could see that she had done her own independent investigation of my case. I specialize in cases exactly like yours. Adult children whose education funds were stolen by parents, spouses who discover hidden financial abuse, elderly family members who have been victimized by relatives they trusted. The evidence patterns are always similar, and the family pressure to avoid consequences is always intense. Detective Rodriguez leaned forward. Margaret has agreed to serve as a forensic consultant on your case free of charge. She has connections with prosecutors who specialize in family financial crimes, and she has a track record of securing full restitution plus damages in cases like yours. I felt tears starting to form in my eyes. After days of feeling abandoned and pressured to accept an unfair settlement, I suddenly had professional allies who understood the magnitude of what had been done to me and who were committed to seeking real justice. There is something else you need to know, Margaret continued. In cases like yours, the initial theft is often just the beginning. Perpetrators who face consequences for their actions frequently escalate their behavior, either by hiding additional assets, intimidating witnesses, or committing new financial crimes to cover their tracks. We need to be prepared for your mother and brother to become more desperate and more dangerous as this investigation proceeds. She was right. Over the past week since Jessica had tried to pressure me into accepting the mediation agreement, both my mother and Austin had been acting strangely. My mother had been making frequent trips to the bank and having hushed phone conversations that stopped whenever I entered the room. Austin had been posting less on social media and had mentioned something about taking care of business before the family deadline expired. "What do you think they might do?" I asked. Detective Rodriguez answered. In my experience, family members who steal education funds often have other hidden financial crimes. They might be hiding additional stolen money, falsifying documents to cover their tracks, or preparing to dispose of assets to avoid having to pay restitution. We need to move quickly to preserve evidence and prevent further financial crimes. Margaret nodded in agreement, That is why I contacted Detective Rodriguez immediately instead of waiting for you to file charges on your own timeline. We need to execute search warrants and freeze assets before your mother and Austin have time to hide or dispose of evidence. The next 3 hours were a whirlwind of legal procedures and evidence review. Detective Rodriguez applied for search warrants for both my mother's and Austin's financial records, including bank accounts, credit card statements, and any safe deposit boxes they might have. Margaret helped me organize my evidence into a format that would be admissible in court, and identified additional documentation we would need to build an unshakable case. But the most important thing they did was validate my decision to pursue justice rather than accepting the family mediation agreement. "Serafina," Margaret said as we wrapped up our meeting, "what was done to you was not a mistake or a lapse in judgment. It was a deliberate, ongoing theft that continued for months while you trusted the people who were supposed to protect you. You have every right to demand full accountability and complete restitution." Detective Rodriguez agreed. Family members who steal education funds are counting on their victims being too guilty or too pressured to pursue real consequences. They rely on statements like, "But we are family, and you are tearing the family apart," to escape accountability. But theft is theft, regardless of who commits it. As I left the police station that afternoon, I felt something I had not experienced since discovering the theft: genuine confidence that justice was possible. I had professional allies who understood the law, who had experience with cases like mine, and who were committed to seeing it through to a real resolution. The family pressure to accept inadequate settlement was about to meet the reality of criminal investigation and prosecution. And for the first time since this nightmare began, I believed that the good guys were going to win. The search warrants were executed on a Tuesday morning while I was at work. Detective Rodriguez called me at 11:30 to let me know that the Financial Crimes Unit had found evidence that went far beyond what I had discovered on my own. "Serafina, you need to sit down for this conversation. What we found at your mother's house and in her financial records indicates that the theft of your college fund was part of a much larger pattern of financial fraud." My hands started shaking as I found a private office at the accounting firm where I worked. "What do you mean, larger pattern? Your mother has been systematically stealing from multiple sources over the past 2 years. She embezzled $12,000 from the nonprofit organization where she works as a bookkeeper. She took out credit cards in your name and your brother's name without authorization, running up almost $8,000 in debt. She also forged your signature on documents to take out a personal loan, using your information as a cosigner." The scope of my mother's crimes was staggering. The theft of my college fund had not been a desperate decision to help Austin with legal troubles. It had been one piece of an ongoing criminal enterprise designed to fund a lifestyle she could not afford on her legitimate income. "But here is the most important part," Detective Rodriguez continued. "When we searched Austin's apartment, we found evidence that he has been actively participating in the fraud. He knew about the identity theft, he helped your mother forge signatures on loan documents, and he has been using the stolen credit cards to make purchases. This is not a case of a young man accepting help from his mother. This is a case of 2 people working together to commit multiple felonies." Margaret Austin had been right about criminals escalating their behavior when faced with consequences. Instead of preparing to make restitution for stealing my college fund, my mother and Austin had been committing additional crimes to maintain their fraudulent lifestyle. The evidence was overwhelming. Financial records showed a pattern of theft, forgery, and identity fraud going back over 2 years. Security cameras from various businesses showed Austin using credit cards that had been taken out in my name. Email correspondence between my mother and Austin revealed detailed planning of their criminal activities, including discussions about which family members would be easiest to steal from next. The most shocking discovery was a handwritten list in my mother's desk drawer, titled "Emergency Fund Sources." It included my college fund, my grandparents' savings account information, my Uncle Robert's investment portfolio details, and even my cousin Jessica's student loan refund amounts. My mother had been researching and planning to steal from every financially stable person in our family. Within 48 hours of the search warrant execution, both my mother and Austin were arrested and charged with multiple felonies: theft, embezzlement, identity fraud, forgery, and conspiracy to commit financial crimes. The evidence was so comprehensive that both of their lawyers recommended accepting plea agreements rather than going to trial. The family reaction was swift and decisive. My grandparents, who had been pressuring me to accept mediation just weeks earlier, immediately cut off all financial and emotional support for my mother and Austin. My Uncle Robert used his banking connections to help me clean up the credit damage and identity theft. Most surprisingly, my cousin Jessica called to apologize for pressuring me to accept an inadequate settlement. "Sarah, I am so sorry. I thought I was helping everyone find a reasonable solution, but I was just enabling criminals to escape consequences for serious crimes. What they did to you was just the beginning of what they were planning to do to all of us." The legal proceedings moved quickly once the evidence was presented. My mother pled guilty to embezzlement, theft, and identity fraud in exchange for a sentence of 18 months in prison and 5 years of supervised probation. Austin pled guilty to conspiracy and accessory charges, receiving 12 months in prison and 3 years of probation. Both were ordered to pay full restitution to all of their victims, plus damages and legal fees. But the financial restitution was only part of the justice I received. The criminal convictions meant that my mother lost her job and her professional licenses permanently. Austin's criminal record made him ineligible for the college program he had been planning to attend with my stolen money. The motorcycle, expensive clothes, and other items purchased with my savings were seized and sold, with the proceeds going directly to my restitution account. More importantly, the truth about their crimes eliminated any family pressure to maintain relationships with people who had betrayed my trust so completely. There was no longer any question about whether I was overreacting or being vindictive. The evidence spoke for itself, and everyone in the family could see that I had been the victim of serious criminals who happened to be related to me. The financial recovery exceeded my original losses. Between the seized assets, wage garnishments, and court-ordered damages, I received $31,000, which was enough to cover 2 full years of university tuition plus living expenses. Margaret Austin helped me set up a protected education account that could not be accessed by anyone except me, ensuring that my college dreams were finally secure from future interference. But the most meaningful outcome was the chosen family I built from the ashes of the biological family that had betrayed me. My grandparents, Aunt Linda, Uncle Robert, and cousin Jessica all played active roles in supporting my recovery and my education. Margaret Austin became an unofficial mentor, helping me develop my interest in forensic accounting into a career path. Detective Rodriguez even offered to serve as a professional reference when I applied to universities with criminal justice programs. 6 months after my mother and Austin were sentenced, I started my freshman year at the State University, majoring in forensic accounting with a minor in criminal justice. I was living in a dorm, participating in campus activities, and building friendships with people who shared my values of honesty and hard work. For the first time in years, I felt like my future was truly my own. The experience taught me that blood relationships mean nothing without loyalty, honesty, and respect. The people who stood by me through the legal proceedings and supported my pursuit of justice became my real family, while the people who prioritized family harmony over accountability revealed themselves to be enablers of criminal behavior. Now, as I finish my junior year with a 4.0 grade point average and internship offers from 3 different forensic accounting firms, I often think about how different my life would have been if I had accepted that family mediation agreement. I would have received partial restitution over 2 years, while my mother and Austin continued stealing from other family members and escalating their criminal activities. Instead, I chose justice over family peace, and that choice changed everything. Not just for me, but for all of the potential victims my mother had been planning to steal from next. Sometimes, doing the right thing means accepting that relationships built on lies and betrayal are not worth preserving. Looking back on this whole experience, I want to know, have you ever had to choose between family loyalty and doing what was right? Have you ever discovered that someone you trusted completely was betraying you behind your scenes? Drop a comment below and share your story, because I know I am not the only one who has dealt with family financial betrayal. If this story resonated with you, please give it a like and subscribe for more real-life justice stories. And share this video with anyone who might be dealing with family financial abuse. Because sometimes, people need to know that pursuing accountability is not about revenge. It is about preventing future victims and reclaiming your own power. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember that you deserve relationships built on honesty and respect, not manipulation and theft. Sometimes the best families are the ones you choose for yourself.